Well, good day there. Welcome to another episode of the Typewriter video series. And today I have a different kind of a topic I want to talk about. And that is dreams as writing inspiration. That's right, dreams as writing inspiration. Stay tuned. So this topic all started when I was writing a little one-page short story piece for typing assignment number 10. And I came up with this crazy little story that you might have seen on my blog. And it was loosely inspired by a dream I had a couple weeks ago. And the story here, the backstory is I've always had serial dreams. I have dreams that seem to take place in the same setting sort of over time, years and years, and it slowly evolves and changes, influenced by where I worked at professionally, for instance, etc. And these settings and the people kind of come and go and change, but there's sort of common themes that run through this. So I had this crazy dream. It wasn't nearly like the story, but it was inspiration for it. And so I was thinking about this, how it relates to typewriters. As you probably know from past episodes, I've talked a lot about creativity and how where the typewriter fits into the writing process so well is that first draft, stream of consciousness, very early part of the writing process, where you're sort of just putting down words, random thoughts maybe, if that's the way you work, if you're a creative writer, for instance. It depends on what genre you're writing into, of course. This, it plays into the typewriter usage, I think, because typewriters are highly adept at, ideally suited, to be used in the early stages of writing. And the early stages of writing, you need inspiration. So one of the ways that I became more conscious of my dream life, if you want to call it that, is by trying to recall as much as I can when I wake about what my dream was about. Now, I've tried to use like a dream diary or a little notepad by my nightstand. That doesn't always work because you don't always feel like stopping, waking up and immediately writing something down, but it certainly helps to, when you first wake, to try to stay in a frame of mind where you're kind of playing in your mind's eye over and over again what it was that you were dreaming about. And you'll notice as you do this over time, you'll get better at it. It's kind of like an exercise that you have to do where you are picking up these hidden narratives in your dream life and you're trying to play them back in your conscious waking mind. And you're kind of melding together your conscious, logical, waking mind with whatever was happening in your subconscious dream state earlier. And as you start to study your dreams by making notes or just thinking about it over time, you might start to notice some narratives or themes or little subtle things that kind of repeat themselves like motifs that happen over and over again. Not every night, it's not consistent, but it's every once in a while you'll have the same kind of dream or similar kind of setting or whatever. It's important to make note of that, to write those down, to document them, okay? Now, there's another way that dream life and your dream state can affect your writing, and that is, it's not just about writing down the details of a dream. That's one way to do it, but sometimes when you wake up, you don't really remember your dreams consciously, but immediately upon waking, you are in a highly creative state, oftentimes. I know I am. And instead of clouding that creativity away with getting on the computer or the internet, your tablet, your phone, or whatever, TV, instead of doing that, that's the best time to sit down at the typewriter or the notepad or pen, a pencil, and start to just create. Because your mind is already in this loose, associative, creative state from the dream state that you've been in the night before. Now, another way that the dream state can affect my creativity is sometimes when I wake and I keep my mind open and not cloud it with things of the internet and phones and TV and all that, sometimes just a word or a phrase will come to me. It'll almost sound like nonsense. Like, where did that come from? Maybe a funny name or a funny phrase. But you want to write that stuff down because that could be fuel for a future creative work. You need a name for some person, you need a name for some place, you need something like that in your work, in your writing. It could come from your dream state. And those are often really highly creative and really important sources of unusual and unique kinds of names and places and things like that you couldn't really easily think up in your conscious mind sitting in front of your typewriter or your computer at the desk. What I'm suggesting is that as creative writers, we should learn to become conscious of our dream state. We need to exercise the connection between our dream state, our subconscious, and our waking state through that early part of waking up, and use that as an important creative time in our morning or wherever we wake up. And I think this is important because it's a muscle that we have to grow, the connectivity between our waking mind and our dream state. And as we do that, I think they can become more lucid and they can become a stronger source of creativity for us as writers. Now, obviously, I'm not suggesting that we should set our typewriter at our nightstand. That's not what I'm saying. Typewriters are just not conducive for that kind of use in the bedroom, I don't think. Use a pad of paper, a pencil, or whatever. I don't know, you could use your phone and make an audible note, but I would rather, if you're going to be in this creative state when you wake, stay away from your phone, stay away from the computers. But allow that to fuel our creativity. Now, there are some examples of this in literature. For instance, I'll point out one example was the author H.P. Lovecraft, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, the pulp, horror, macabre author from the 1930s. He had a story called The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. It was sort of a novelette. And in that novelette, he had the character of the story was discovering this whole world in his dreams, and they became more and more lucid so that he wanted to spend more and more time in a sleep state so he could explore it. It was almost like a second world that he was exploring in his dream state. I'm not suggesting that that's what we need to strive for in this. I'm just simply suggesting that there is a whole fountain of hidden creativity available to us from our subconscious that we can tap into in those early waking moments after we arise. Relating to this, there is a slightly related thing I've noticed with me when I'm typing, when I'm creating spontaneously on a typewriter. And that is, I get into what I might call a typing trance. And it's not like hypnotism or anything. It's just simply that there's two things going on at once. There is, first of all, my inner thoughts are thinking about the narrative, the story, the words, where I want them to go. I'm thinking a couple sentences ahead, maybe a couple phrases ahead, or just a couple words ahead. I'm also maybe thinking at the same time more strategically where I want the story to go as I'm trying to piece together each part of the paragraph or sentence that I'm currently working on. So that inner thought thing is going on, but simultaneously with that, there is the physical motor control interaction with your body and the typewriter. That is to say, you're in front of the typewriter, your motor parts of your brain are operating your fingers and you are operating the keys, you're feeling feedback on the keys, which is what makes typewriters cybernetic in a literal sense. It's that mechanical feedback. As you press the key, you feel the feedback on your fingers. So you're trying to physically operate this thing, and it's complicated. Operating a manual typewriter adeptly is a complicated task to do it without error, to do it rapidly so you can keep up with your thoughts. But so you have these two things going on at once. You have the inner mind working on the story and what the words need to be, and then you have your physical body operating the typewriter to try to get those words down on paper accurately as possible. And I find for me what happens when you get into the groove, the typing trance, is your mind doesn't have any time to distract itself on anything else. You're fully occupied. The creative side of you is working on the story, in your mind as you're going, and the physical interaction, the motor control part of your mind is interacting with the typewriter. You're totally engaged, and there's no room for distractions, distracting thoughts to interrupt and interfere with you. That's what I call the typing trance. And I like to think of it as freewheeling. There's some kind of an engine of creativity in your mind that is, when you get into this groove, it freewheels. It's not perpetual motion, but it becomes easy. There's an ease of it when you get into the groove, and your mind and your body interacting with the typewriter, and it becomes super easy channel, a super open channel for creativity to flow from your mind onto the paper as ink on paper. Now, there are several enablers that you can use to enable this typing trance, this creative flow, this freewheeling inner creativity to come out as efficiently as possible onto paper via your typewriter and your fingers. And that is several things. One of the things that for me works really well is to rig up an endless roll of paper, the sort of Jack Kerouac on the road typing scroll. And you've seen me cover this in past episodes. There's various ways of doing this. I use a wooden folding tray table with a broom stick dowel and a roll of paper in there underneath the table, feeding it up to the typewriter. You can get fancy and rig up something that hangs off the back of your typewriter if you want to, but that simple scroll on a portable little lightweight table works really well. But the whole point of it is to enable you to continuously type. When the bell rings, sling the carriage back, keep typing, and not stop, interrupt your train of thought, not to interrupt your creativity with having to change the paper. Because you got to change the paper, you got to pull the old paper out, you got to get the other piece of paper. If you're using a backing sheet of paper, you got to get the backing sheet of paper lined up, get them lined up, feed them into the machine, and then you're going to flip up the bail and, oh, I have to adjust the paper and get it straight. Oh, okay, then I have to start up. And by that time, you lost your whole train of thought. It's just this constant interruption. So having an endless scroll of paper to do this creative, spontaneous writing on is really important. It really helps me to get into that groove, that freewheeling engine of creativity working. Another thing that really helps me is to use the same typewriter. Now, a lot of us typewriter aficionados have a lot of machines, maybe a half a dozen, a dozen, or 2 dozen or more typewriters, and we love them all, or most of them. But you know what? Not every machine works as well with our personal proclivities, and we really will find in our collection a certain smaller subset of typewriters that works best for us. Maybe one machine that you prefer to write on. If that's the case, use that machine. Find what machine that is and use that for your creativity. I'll give you an example of that from the recent film California Typewriter. Tom Hanks has at his desk or table a stack of paper next to it, and he has his favorite machine. I think he likes to use the Smith Corona 5 series is one of the favorites that he likes. But keep it around, keep it in a prominent place where you can get to it, where it's always available to use, okay? In his case, he's not necessarily using a typewriter for lengthy creative stuff. He's making notes and letters and stuff like that, missives. But if you're trying to type creatively a longer piece, that scroll of paper really works. The other thing is maybe being able to either have an ideal writing setup, an office, a cubby hole, a secluded writing shed, a writing room, a little hidden place where you can be creative and be separated away from all the other distractions, like some people like to do. Or if you're more like me, you like to move around, you like to change your venue, and that's why A, I like portable typewriters, and B, I like to put them on a little folding tray table, and I can pick the thing up and move it around to the front porch here, to the patio room, the backyard, the man cave shed, the back porch, wherever, the office, wherever you want to sit. That's why it's nice to be able to, for me, to be able to move a typewriter around. So having the same typewriter, the same mechanics, the same machine, you get used to the haptics of the keyboard. If your backspace key is on either the left or right side, you might prefer it one way or the other. You want to use it that way. You want to get used to that key. Don't switch machines back and forth where the backspace key is always on the opposite side. You'll never get used to it. Right? So make the mechanical typing as interactive and as second nature as you can. And that will hopefully put you in that typing trance of dreamlike creativity. sort of related to the last point is it's okay for us to collect a lot of typewriters. It really is. But I'll tell you, being a typewriter collector and being a writer who writes with typewriters is not the same thing. Those two interests have different goals. Typewriter collecting is all about amassing a certain assortment that you happen to like, but using a typewriter for writing is about finding that one machine or the few machines that really suit you best. Those are two entirely different goals, and you might find, hopefully, if you are a typewriter collector who also wants to aspire to be a creative writer, hopefully you'll find that within your collection you have that one good machine that you can use. But my point is, begin to use your typewriter for creative writing and practice at it. And you have to get practiced enough so you can work flawlessly with your machine. And I'm not implying you have to be a touch typist with a manual typewriter. No siree, no ma'am. 2 fingers, that's all you need. Even 1 finger. You just got to get flawlessly interactive with your machine. So the physical haptics of using the machine becomes second nature. It becomes muscle memory. And then the inner creative flow can flow through your hands and fingers. And the constant physical interaction is that block that eliminates all the other distractions around you. So marry your typewriter, okay? So it's okay to shack up with a bunch of typewriters if you're a collector, but if you're a writer, you want to marry a typewriter and stick with it. And speaking about this idea of constant practice, it is important that we use a regimen of continually practicing stream of consciousness writing, because the idea is to connect the subconscious part of your mind that you're slowly becoming aware of from your dream state as you become more aware of your dream life, connecting that into the stream of consciousness act of writing with a typewriter, creating with a typewriter, sitting down with a bare piece of paper and just starting to create. So constant stream of consciousness practice writing is super important. If you combine that with becoming more aware of your inner dream state and trying to document elements of that to use within your creative writing, that can be very powerful. A powerful fountain of a resource, an inner resource of creativity. So exercising the inner free wheel, there's a flywheel, an inner flywheel, and you want to exercise that. The energy of it comes from your subconscious, your dream state, all the sources of creativity within you, and you want to fuel it with that fresh life from your inner dream state, and you want to make those cogs mesh smoothly by constantly practicing with creative writing with your typewriter. Learn the haptics of your interaction with your typewriter to become a creative writer with a typewriter. Okay, this is Joe Van Cleve, and I hope these were some valuable little ideas for you to incorporate your dream life in your inner creative life and using that with typewriters to be a creative writer. Until next time, you guys have yourselves a great day.